This episode of the A.T.TIPSCAST is sponsored by TextHelp Systems, provider of award-winning literacy solutions including Read and Write Gold and Fluency Tutor. For more information, go to www.texthelp.com. That's www.texthelp.com.
It's easy to see, communicating is key. Be the best that we can be, communicating is key. It's easy to see, communicating is key. Be the best that we can be.
Welcome to the A.T.TIPSCAST, exploring and investigating the implementation of assistive technology in public schools. I'm your host, Chris Bouguet. This is episode number 55, recorded on May 10th, 2010. There's this thing I used to do all the time. I spent hours practicing it, perfecting it. I started really practicing it sometime in the second grade. I practiced it for hours and hours, and now I rarely ever use this skill that I had worked so diligently to perfect. What skill am I talking about? Handwriting.
You think you had it bad? I went to Catholic school. Sister Phyllis used to whap me on the knuckles when I wrote a letter wrong. All those bloody knuckles, and for what? I barely write anything by hand anymore.
Ouch. Like my wife, besides making the occasional to-do list and leaving notes about how much I love her, I rarely write anything by hand. A different skill, one I barely practiced at all while growing up, at least formally anyway, is one that I actually do use all the time. Keyboarding. Looking at the contemporary workforce, I'm hard-pressed to think of an occupation that requires a person to handwrite more than 2 sentences. Granted, I'm no employment expert, but what jobs out there require anyone to handwrite more than 2 sentences at a time? Sometimes, in various jobs, you have to fill out forms, and sometimes you have to fill in blanks. And in our daily lives, we often make lists or jot quick notes. But with handheld technologies, even those uses for handwriting are dwindling. So, if society in general has moved away from handwriting, then maybe education should shift as well. Depending on the needs of the student, the IEP team could write an accommodation to have some alternative means of expression for any written assignment over 2 sentences in length. Specifically, I'm talking about allowing a student to type longer assignments, but that's just one alternative method. The student could also text or record his or her voice into a device, like a computer, smartphone, or some other mobile device. Let me be clear about something. I'm not suggesting that students abandon handwriting practice altogether. I believe there's still a need to know that skill, but I do think we should recognize that a societal shift has occurred in the last 20 years. This shift is away from handwriting as a method of communication and toward keyboarding and texting on mobile phones. With keyboarding becoming a new lifelong skill comes the necessity to practice and hone this skill. Keyboarding practice, however, can be as dry as the Sahara in the middle of the summer. Therefore, A.T.TIPS 89 through 91 are all tools or strategies that make practicing keyboarding fun. Wasn't that some beautiful music? That was me using A.T.TIP number 89, buttonbeats.com. Buttonbeats has an on-screen keyboard that plays notes based on keystrokes on a computer keyboard. It also provides a number of notes for popular and classic songs. Just click on Click to activate keyboard control. As a student types in the notes of a song, they are practicing keyboarding, learning where all the letters are on the keyboard as they play the song. Pretty cool, right? See if you can guess this song as I practice my mad keyboarding skills. There's actually tons more to do on this site besides just practicing keyboarding, including recording, music composition, and more. I hope you go over there and play with some of the controls, but this episode isn't about music or Jedi Knights. No, it's about keyboarding. So, let's move on to A.T.TIP number 90, Keyboard.com. Keyboard.com is a bit more of a straightforward computer keyboard tutor. With default settings, a user types in letters of both real and made-up words. Letters are painted in black if you type them correctly, or in red if you make a typo. You can skip the current phrase by clicking on the right arrow, or you can go to the previous phrase by clicking on the left arrow. To highlight letters with errors, click on the little red circle button. It sort of looks like an icon of a gear or a flower. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see a virtual keyboard. The next key to be typed is highlighted in green, and if you make mistakes, it will highlight them in red. Keyboard has some fun options too, like being able to customize the text you're going to type or import text from a website. So, if you want, you could import text from your favorite website, A.T.TIPSCAST.wordpress.com, or from your student's favorite website, nightlightstories.net. Students could keyboard about curriculum content as an extra layer of content practice, or practice keyboarding using text about a subject that is highly motivating to them. Keyboard also provides a progress chart and provides data on typing speed and number of errors. Another typing program that is a little more drill and kill and a little less fun, but still, some students might respond better to that approach, is A.T.TIP number 91, goodtyping.com. There's a try it without registering button, which allows students to try it without a login. If you want to keep track of progress over time, users need to register, but don't worry, that's free too. Once you've read the instructions, click on the Start Lesson 1 button. A website appears with a virtual keyboard with a bank of letters underneath it. The first letter, J, is in red and underlined. Underneath that letter bank is an empty text box. The typist enters in the red letter into the text box and the next letter turns red. The user keeps going until all the letters are in. There are some other options as well, including increasing or decreasing the font size of the letters in the letter bank. Once the user completes all of the letters, a personalized message is generated, providing the total number of errors, percentage of errors, keystrokes per minute, and words per minute. In the interest of time, I broke this episode up into two parts because I actually have a few other AT tips for keyboarding practice, which I will get to in a future episode. If you haven't checked out the blog, Brian Dowd and Bill Peters left comments over there for episode 53 about how to activate the high contrast feature in Mac and Linux respectively. In that episode, I had put the call out to anyone who might have expertise to supply that information. Brian and Bill heeded the call. For those of you who don't check the blog, here's what they said. Brian wrote, "There's a Mac OS equivalent to the Windows contrast. By holding down the Function, Control, Option, Command keys on the left, then holding down the 8, the contrast will change. Doing the same action reverses the contrast. All the universal access preferences can be found in the System Preferences." Bill wrote, "Currently in the Linux operating system, specifically Ubuntu, this can be done, but not through the Assistive Technologies options. There are two desktop themes designed for people with visual impairment. They are High Contrast Inverse and High Contrast Large Print Inverse. To enable these, the user must navigate System, Preferences, Appearance. Then they must select the desired theme. In an educational setting, this might be acceptable because the instructor can do this for the student. But it seems to me there needs to be a way to do this with simple keystrokes, such as Shift-Alt-Print Screen, Shift-Alt-Print Screen, Shift-Alt-Print Screen, Shift-Alt-Print Screen. I can't get it out of my head! Thanks a ton, Brian and Bill, for filling in those gaps. So much obliged. I hope it really helps people out there. I'm sure it will. Although not stated in the episode 54, The Small Mermaid actually featured 2 AT tips for all of those out there who like to keep track at home. AT tip number 87 was the 100 most frequently used words, and AT tip number 88 was for a communication notebook. I have links pertaining to both of those over at the blog A.T.TIPSCAST.wordpress.com. Also, I should let you know that snapvine.com went under, so I had to remove that as a feature on the blog. I've been thinking about using Google Voice as an alternative, but I want to know what you think. Do you know of a free service where you could leave voicemail messages? If so, I'm all ears. Speaking of ways to communicate, that little musical ditty at the beginning of this episode was the free ringtone you can download from the American Speech Language Hearing Association's Better Hearing and Speech Month website. You can find that, plus tons of other free resources, over at www.asha.org. That's www.asha.org. If you haven't already done so, I highly recommend checking out the Practical and Fun Guide to Assistive Technology in Public Schools, which you can check out over at isti.org/chew-AT, and become a fan on Facebook over at bit.ly/atbookfb. That's bit.ly/atbookfb. Of course, I'll have links to both of those over at A.T.TIPSCAST.wordpress.com. On the Facebook fan page, you can post your picture with the book, participate in discussion forums, learn and share additional resources, and much more. That's it for this episode. Until next time, may all your interventions be inclusive, and may all your strategies be supportive.